He left on a Tuesday. She found out he was gone when she came downstairs at 7:15 and found his keys on the counter, his wedding ring beside them, and a note that said, in its entirety, that he was sorry and that the children were hers. She had 3 children, a boy of 7, a girl of 5, and a baby of 11 months who was still asleep upstairs. She had no access to their bank accounts. The joint account had been closed. She would discover 4 days later, 4 days before he left. The credit card she used for the weekly shop had been canceled that same morning. Her phone showed £17.40. Her name is Rachel. She was 36 years old. What happened in the 18 months that followed is one of the most complete reversals of financial power I have documented for this channel. Rachel and her husband, Martin, had been married for 9 years. From the outside, and from the inside, for most of that time, the marriage looked functional. Not particularly romantic, not particularly communicative, but stable. Ordinary in the way that most marriages eventually become ordinary. Martin worked in commercial finance. He earned well. He managed the family's money. That last sentence is the one that matters. He managed the family's money. Not they. Him. Alone. Rachel had worked in human resources before their first child arrived. When her son was born, she took maternity leave. When their daughter arrived 2 years later, the numbers didn't work for full-time childcare, and Martin was clear that his career couldn't take the disruption. Rachel stayed home. He told her it was the right decision. He told her it was what they both wanted. Financial abuse does not always begin with control. It often begins with convenience, with a partner who earns more stepping in, simplifying things, taking the load. The erosion happens slowly. The joint account becomes the account he manages. The credit card becomes the one she uses for groceries. And somewhere in the drift of ordinary life, financial independence disappears without anyone having made a single obvious decision to remove it. Rachel had access to a household spending account Martin topped up each month. She paid for food, school uniforms, children's activities, the weekly shop. She did not know what their pension was worth. She did not know what savings existed or where they were held. She did not know whether they had investments or what their mortgage balance was or who held their life insurance. She had trusted Martin to manage all of that. Martin had managed all of that. Her first action, an emergency application for a financial disclosure order. Martin would be required, within 14 days, to provide a complete account of every asset, bank account, pension, investment, and liability he held, individually and jointly. Her second action, an application for interim financial provision. A court order compelling Martin to fund Rachel and the 3 children's living costs immediately, while formal proceedings were underway. Her third action, a formal letter to Martin's solicitors. It emerged that Martin had already retained one, a fact that told its own story, noting that the closure of the joint account 4 days before his departure and the cancellation of the household credit card on the morning he left constituted deliberate financial conduct that the court would be required to examine. That timing was the detail Sarah had seized on immediately. For days, not the day he left, 4 days before. Closing a joint account 4 days in advance of departing is not an act of confusion. It is an act of planning. Family courts look at financial conduct in the period preceding separation extremely carefully. Martin had believed he was securing his position. He had, in fact, created the most damaging piece of evidence Sarah would use. The interim provision order was granted within a week. Martin was ordered to pay Rachel a monthly sum covering household costs, the children's needs, and her legal fees, immediately and without further argument. This is completely unreasonable. She has everything she needs. I have never left my children without. Sarah's reply was measured and final. Your client closed the joint account on the 7th of the month. He departed on the 11th. Mrs. Thornton's phone displayed £17 when she found the note. The court has formed its view of the relevant conduct. The financial disclosure documents arrived on day 13. A primary defined benefit pension held in Martin's name, valued at £294,000. A stocks and shares ISA, also in Martin's name, £177,000. A buy-to-let property, purchased in year 4 of the marriage, in Martin's name only. Current market value, $260,000. Outstanding mortgage, $109,000. Net equity, $151,000. The family home held in joint names. Estimated equity after mortgage, £218,000. Total disclosed net assets, approximately £840,000. I didn't know. I knew we weren't struggling. I had no idea there was this much. Sarah waited for her to finish reading. Every one of these assets was accumulated during the marriage. Under English family law, the starting presumption is equality 50-50. He can argue against it. He will argue against it. But that is where we begin. Rachel had walked into that office 8 days earlier with 17 pounds. She was now looking at the starting position for dividing $840,000. It was the first time she had ever seen the full financial picture of her own marriage. The disclosed assets accumulated during 9 years of marriage were as follows. A primary defined benefit pension held in Martin's name, valued at £294,000. A stocks and shares ISA, also in Martin's name, £177,000. Sarah waited for her to finish reading. The settlement was finalized at mediation 11 months after Martin left. Rachel retained the family home outright. Martin's share of the equity was set off against his allocation of other assets. She received a pension sharing order for 46% of Martin's pension. Approximately £135,000 transferred into a pension in her own name. She received a lump sum of £72,000 from the ISA, after Martin retained the buy-to-let property as his primary asset. She received ongoing child maintenance, calculated against Martin's verified income and backdated to the month he left. Martin retained the buy-to-let property, the remainder of the ISA, and control of his career and his income. He also retained the consequences of having closed a joint account 4 days before leaving. I didn't want to ruin him. I needed the children to be protected. That's the only thing that mattered to me throughout all of it, making sure that what he chose to do didn't land on them. I asked her what had surprised her most about the process. That I had rights I didn't know about. That the law knew what I had contributed, even when I couldn't articulate it myself. That 9 years of being invisible on paper didn't mean 9 years of being invisible to the court. She paused, and that those 17 pounds, that was the detail that made everything else possible, because the timing proved everything. The children are doing well. What Martin did in the days before he left, closing those accounts, canceling that card, was premeditated. The court saw it. Sarah understood it from the first appointment. But the 9 years before that Tuesday morning were also a form of control. Not dramatic, not obvious, just the slow, incremental removal of Rachel's ability to exist financially without him. Rachel is not an unusual case. Thousands of people, in most cases women, but not only women, exit relationships having had their financial independence quietly removed across years of ordinary life, until the moment they need it is the moment they discover it isn't there. The law, in Rachel's case, worked. Sarah Okafor knew exactly what to do with it. The timing of those account closures was the evidence that shaped everything. Rachel's 9 years of unpaid contribution were legally recognized. Not every story ends here. Family law is expensive, slow, and inconsistent. But when it works, it is worth knowing what it can do. Know what is in your joint accounts. Know what pension exists in your household and whose name it is in. Know what you would have access to if tomorrow looked different from today. Rachel knew nothing. Now she knows everything. If this story stayed with you, there are more below. And if something in it felt familiar, the resource in the description is a starting point. You do not have to figure it out alone.